Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. I've got a really powerful conversation to share with you today with Lisa Ramos and her husband, Dave. And Lisa and I have something in common, which is that we've both been run over by a motor vehicle. She was run over, she'll tell us, by a forklift and sadly suffered an amputation. I was run over by a car. And my injuries, thankfully, were not as severe. But we speak, I guess, about what happened to us both and how it feels, and interestingly, what the effect was on the people around us. Perhaps in many ways more so than the effect on us as individuals. And we touch a bit about the feeling of the drivers as well. So, you know, the people that were in some respects responsible for what happened and how it must have felt for them, and try and come up with an empathetic perspective on that as well. So it's a bit different, this conversation, than others we'd have on the podcast. And I found it quite therapeutic and really interesting. And I hesitate to say enjoyed it, but I kind of enjoyed it as well. I'm sure you'll get a lot from it too. And I'd really encourage you to listen carefully to Lisa and Dave's story and consider getting them in to come and talk in your business, because that's what they do now. They go in and talk about accidents and the effects that it has on not only the injured party, but also their family as well. So let's join this conversation then with myself, Lisa, and Dave. See you on the other side of the credits, and hope you find this insightful, useful, and I'm sure you'll find it a powerful conversation. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. For now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Been looking forward to speaking to you about this, because you and I, Lisa, share something in common, albeit yours was a much more serious incident than mine, because we've both been run over.
Yeah.
Which is not something that we would want to have in common, but sadly we do. So, but hopefully we can learn some lessons from that and talk about, you know, not really talking much about me, obviously, but talk about your experiences and shed some insights on, you know, what that situation's like, and bring in a bit about Dave and the effects on your family and friends and stuff as well. So yeah, should be a good conversation.
Okay.
So do you want to just start? Let's dive straight into it. You know, talk to me about what happened. Tell me about, you know, that fateful day.
So I'd not come from a warehousing background, but Dave had been a forklift driver, so he had told me that there was a position going within his warehouse. Now, I remember when I first started working there being quite frightened how closely we worked alongside the forklifts. But the thing is I know that I became very comfortable working around them quite quickly. And I don't know whether that it was the fact I was the first woman to ever work within that warehouse. So maybe I was feeling like I was overreacting to the situation, you know, that, you know, why would I be put at risk? You know, so it wasn't very long before I started, well, I suppose, being quite complacent when it came to working around the forklift. So the day of the accident, it was no different to any other day. It was actually half an hour before we were finishing our shift. It happened to be our son's 13th birthday. And the layout where I actually was, we had got 4 empty containers with a walkway directly in front of it. Right. And I was on the walkway, I was walking to actually see my team leader to give him the handover for the next shift. So because we'd finished everything, I didn't realise that there was a forklift in the empty container. Obviously, there was a driver in there. And I walked past that first container. I'm in between the first and the second. And he's come out and reversed over me because he hasn't realised that I'm there either. Now, I can actually remember that at the time, the driver said he thought he'd run some tape over. That's what he thought. And someone's actually said to me since, it's because that the forklifts don't have a suspension.
Right.
You know, because we used to use tape to do the floor plans. You know, like, so the tape for the walkway was just green tape. You're talking like a roll of tape like this. But that's what he actually thought he'd run over. The problem is that I was so close to the wall that the only way for him to get off me was basically running me back over, you know, and that caused such a lot of nerve damage. And I think that people think that because I lost a limb, that that's the worst thing. It isn't. It's the pain you're left with afterwards. So I had such a lot of nerve damage because he's gone over me and tore everything one way, and then to come off me, he's had to then go in the other direction. So for me, it's actually the pain that you're left with afterwards that's the worst part with regards to the injuries. You know, but I think the worst part for both of us is the impact that it had on our son. You know, because rehabilitation, I know that all I cared about was myself. You know, that it was many years. In fact, it was only really since myself and Dave started going into companies and delivering our speeches that I actually heard what Dave had gone through. Because I'll be honest, it sounds so selfish, but I can remember being so shocked when I heard Dave speak for the first time. And for a long time, I cried the whole time he was speaking, because I genuinely believed that he didn't go through anything. And when I look back now, because the injured party gets so much counselling, because that's who they focus on, I was the one who was actually able to come to terms with it
better,
a lot quicker than anybody else. I mean, my mum, she's never got over it, but I know that if my mum would have said to me at the time, I think I'm going to have counselling, I probably would have thought she was being a drama queen. You know, I would have thought, why are you having counselling? It didn't happen to you. But, you know, she sees the struggle. You know, for me, I'm thinking, look at me, I'm walking. I know that my mum is thinking, look how she's walking. You know, and so it's so different. And I understand that now, because when I look at Kieran, I used to think this shouldn't have been his life. You know, because mentally it does, you know, it does devastate the family. I mean, I can remember my uncle would be sitting in the back of my hospital room crying, like absolutely crying. And I'd just be thinking, is he for real? I can hear what he's saying, you know, and he'd be, the stuff that he would say is like, oh, well, life's over and all this other stuff. And I'd be like, I can hear that. I can hear what they're thinking. You know, it was so surreal. And the thing is that although family, you know, there was never a case of me and Dave pretending that life wasn't hard, they don't actually see the real situation. Because if you're socializing, you can forget about any problems that you've got at home or what you're going through. So, you know, if there was a time where, you know, psychologically I'd be struggling, it would be such a shock to the family, because for them, it had come from nowhere. To them, I was all right. So why was I now saying things like, I wish he'd have killed me? Because that's how I felt at some of the points when things became hard, or, you know, things became a struggle. Because the thing is that when you have an accident, what people don't realise is one, you're having to come to terms with, you know, in my case, I do identify as disabled, but I know that a lot of disabled people, well, I'm not even going to say a lot of disabled people, some people wouldn't consider themselves to have a disability, whereas I do. And coming to terms with that, whilst also having to deal with investigation at work, investigation by the HSE, investigation by the benefits people, you know, the solicitors, and all of that alongside your son going off the rails. It's a lot to go, it's a lot to try and process, and that can be difficult. And I think that my way of coping with that at the time was to basically not deal with Kieran, and not deal with some of those things. But obviously those things don't go away. And then the tricky thing is that once you've come to terms that this is your new life, you then try and start playing the role of mum again. It's too late. The child's 16. Why should they listen to you? You know, you haven't been available. And the problem was the roles that me and Dave had in the family, I was the one that kept an eye on Kieran and kept him in check. And then I was no longer capable or willing to do that. And obviously Dave was trying to juggle everything whilst also looking after me, you know. So for me, it's the ripple effect. The ripple effect is far worse than the injury, you know. So despite the pain, despite everything else, it's a ripple effect, because now you can see the damage to your child that this accident has had and still has. You know, it's only really now that we're seeing any improvement with Kieran, because for a long time it affected his behaviour, you know, the way that he thought, the way that he lived his life. And that's difficult. That's difficult because there is a lot of guilt. So although people will say, well, at the end of the day, you coped the best that you could at the time, there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, because it's like, but I should have been more present. I should have done this and I should have done that, you know. And there's a lot of in hindsight afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that stood out to me there. One is that we are very guilty in the world of, you know, trivializing accidents and insurance claims and putting you know, putting a number on it and looking at it from that perspective, and not thinking about this ripple effect, as you've called it, because, you know, anything that happens to anyone, you know, that's you know, even if you broke your wrist, you know, that still has a knock-on effect on your family life and so on, doesn't it? You know, never mind something as serious as what happened to you. So I think that's certainly a real lesson to learn, is to not forget the human costs.
I think that is the problem. I think that is the problem. Don't get me wrong, I think things have improved so much over the years, but I had a huge issue with the fact that not one person said that they were sorry in terms of the company or the driver. That for me was very, very difficult. And I can remember my therapist, and it used to get on my nerves, to be honest, every session he'd say, what difference would it make with regards to the driver apologising to me? He would say, what difference would it make? It wouldn't change the fact that you're in that wheelchair. But for me, it would have made a difference at the time. Because for me, you know, when you're so focused on, we can't say we're sorry because that's admitting liability, I'll be honest, I find that quite disgusting. I find that quite disgusting, because there is words that you can find, you know, like, we are sorry that this happened to you, you know, and so... Which
would have made you feel better, but wouldn't have been a problem to them.
I never blame the company. I never blame the company. You know, I was so focused on, well, the driver wasn't looking where he was going, you know. after so many years, so probably after about 3 years, I started listening to the therapist, because it wouldn't have made a difference at that point. But I knew that I could make a difference to the driver. I knew that I could, but I couldn't do everything for him. He still needed to have the courage to approach me, you know. And I think that when I talk about the company, I'm not talking about the people on my site, because our site manager was absolutely amazing. It's when I call them the no faces, you know, those that so high up that you don't even know them. You know, I call them the no faces. It's when they get involved, you are now a problem that they need to deal with. You're not this person who's had this horrible accident at their business. You are a problem. And that's how they saw it, you know. So I've still got a lot of love for the people that I work with, for the majority of the bosses that I worked for, you know, because I knew that, you know, they would have done anything for this not to have happened. And I knew that they would have done anything to have made my life easier, you know. And that made a difference to me, because our site manager, he wanted to make my dining room into a bedroom and get us a stair lift. Now, I knew, because I'm not daft, I knew that would never be allowed, because that's admitting liability, you know. But it was enough for me that he wanted to do that. That was enough for me, you know. And so I do think that things would have been different had it happened now, you know. I just think at the time the company did not know what to do, and they were running around like headless chickens. But what they didn't realise is that some of the things that they were doing had a deep effect on me mentally, you know. And that's really, really sad, because, you know, you've got such a lot going on that it's not nice once the solicitors get involved, because that's when things get quite nasty.
I'm just going to give a bit of context about what happened to me, because I've got a question and I've got a thought from my perspective, and I'm interested to get your opinion. So if anybody hasn't heard my story, so basically I was walking down the pavement towards a T-junction with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. So she was stood to my right, or walking down the road, the pavement to my right, and basically a car came round the corner of the T-junction, the top of the T, too fast, lost control, and sort of swerved and ended up mounting the curb and driving into me. So for me, interestingly, I have a total blackout of the whole thing. So it's really interesting that you remember it. I remember kind of locking my car and then coming out of the car park onto the pavement to go into a Sainsbury's. And then that's the last thing I remember for several hours. Whereas for my wife, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier really resonated, you know, she remembers the whole thing vividly, and mentally it was such a challenge for her, because she lived through the whole thing, whereas I kind of didn't live through it from a recall perspective. But one of the things that you know, people have often asked me is, oh, what happened to the driver, and like, what would you do if you saw the driver, and what would you say to the driver? And it's interesting that I mean, did the driver did you never speak to the driver again, or was there ever an apology, or no?
No. The thing is that because I'd had that counselling, I didn't need the apology. Because I then started, it's only really in the last 5 years, to be honest, we actually did a speech where this guy were brave enough to speak to me from the perspective of the driver. And I say brave enough because obviously I'm a bit fiery. So, you know, he said to me, well, let's look at it from the driver. And it's actually quite sick, because I was the driver. We've reenacted it. So I'm sat in the wheelchair and I'm reenacting the accident as though I'm the driver. And so I started looking at it from his point of view. Then I started thinking, and I thought to myself, I know for a fact now, the driver would have been told by the company and the union, stay away until this investigation is done. Now, just because I may have not have listened to that advice, had I been the driver, is irrelevant, really. You know, that's what he would have been told. And so how do you then approach somebody 6 months later and go, I'm sorry that this, you know, that this happened, kind of thing? You know, I also think that I was probably in his blind spot, you know, so there was a lot of things that were going on, you know, but we have seen the driver since. And I must admit, they got a bit angry. And the thing was, I think it was because at the time just had another surgery. It hadn't gone to plan. I was in a lot more pain than I'd been previously. And the driver just looked at us, you know, and I don't know what the reason for that was. Maybe he was shocked to see us, you know, I don't know. But the thing is, while you're holding on to all of this resentment towards somebody, the only person it's impacting is you and those that actually love you. You know, my family and friends couldn't even tell you what the driver's first name was.
No.
Because although I focused on it, and I focused on it a lot, I never wanted, and Dave, obviously, I never wanted them to. We actually found during lockdown, amongst some of Kieran's schoolwork, a statement that he wrote. And he wrote about the driver, that he was angry at the driver. But he didn't know the driver's name, you know, because this driver was a good driver. He was experienced. I felt comfortable around him. You know, I never felt unsafe or anything like that. You know, it was purely an accident. I think I needed an apology, though, because my life had changed forever. And, you know, and for a while, that's what I focused on. You know, I don't focus on that at all now. I'd have no feelings either way. You know, if the driver approached me now and said, could we sit down and discuss what had happened? 100% I would do that, because I know, although his apology would have no impact on me whatsoever, that I could have an impact on him. You know, but I can't do everything for him. I can't reach out to him. He's got to do a little bit of the groundwork himself. You know,
it's like we do discuss the fact that obviously we don't know the impact that it had on him, his family. You know, I mean, I honestly cannot think about running somebody over and then not apologizing, if you get what I mean. But because of the fact that he was told not to approach, and then all that time has gone past, you know, how did it impact his family? You know, we know how it impacted Kieran. Did it impact his children the same with him changing? You know, because obviously, although he did go back to work, he wasn't a liked person and he had to change shift. You know, we don't know how it impacted his life afterwards.
And it must have had an impact, because you couldn't
we've gone into companies where they've had accidents, and you know, we would like to encourage companies to say to the people, you know, is it okay to talk to the driver that's had the accident? You know, is it okay to talk to the injured party? You know, because of the fact that we know that could help both of them. It's not just the injured party that it is going to help. It will help the driver as well.
And of course, you know, the driver and the lady that ran me over, you know, and pretty much everybody, 99.99999% of people that injure other people in accidents, you know, they're not doing it maliciously. They're not trying to do it. So it has, you know, they might be careless and they might have, you know, made mistakes and, you know, but so that is something that is going to affect them and has happened. It's kind of happened to them, albeit in a different way.
A completely different way. Because I know at the time they had to take the driver off. He was in shock. I think he was probably in more shock than what I was in, you know. But it is crazy over the years that I used the line, they saved me. And when I say that, I mean mentally. That's what I mean. There's been so many people who's had such a positive impact. And I think that the lads at work, that was the first of being saved, because they wouldn't let me look at the injuries. They told me that I dislocated my knee. So to be honest, when I actually got taken to the hospital and you're signing your consent forms because you're having an operation, it actually crossed my mind that the surgeon, when he said we may have to amputate, that he was only saying that in case he did something wrong during the surgery. That's what I actually thought, because they told me that that was it. They told me initially that I dislocated my knee.
Yeah.
But I now know that I think the foot was hanging off at that point. They wouldn't let me sit up. They wouldn't let me look. You know, in fact, I know that they ended up with a commendation from the ambulance service, because by the time they turned up, I was laughing and joking because they was just trying to keep me calm, you know, and not be thinking about, you know, what my injuries might be, etc. I genuinely went to hospital thinking I was going to end up with a pin in my leg and that I'd end up with a scar going up.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's what I thought had happened. And when you look back now, you think how naive to think that. But I'm so glad that they did what they did, because I think if I'd have known as I was on the way to hospital, I think that once then you're medicated with the morphine or the tramadol, whatever it is that you're given, you know, because I went in with the mindset that it was only a minor injury, I was able to then just heal, you know, rather than having time to think about things properly. I think had I gone in knowing, you know, I mean, obviously at the end of the day, I think even if I'd have known at that point that I would have had 8 operations altogether, you know, it isn't just a straight where people think, well, she's had an amputation, that's one operation. You know, there was three amputations: the foot, the knee, and the leg. You know, it's separate surgery. I mean, the last operation was in August of last year. You know, so it isn't even a case of that this, you have your operation and then this is just the life that you live now for the last 17 years. There's been operations, you know, over though, because I'm trying to find something that will help with the pain, because when it first happened and the doctors are like, you know, we're concerned that the concoction of medication that you're taking could have a long-term effect on you. When you're 32, you're young. Who cares? Just giving them drugs. That's what you're thinking about. When you start getting older and you're like, oh, hang on a minute here. You know, I'm getting a bit older now and I don't really want my life being shortened, thank you. You know, then you start looking at other options. But the problem is with every operation that I've had, the pain has got worse.
Right.
So it's actually had the opposite effect. It's been more medication than when I first gone in, you know, but I think that now I'm at a place where it'll be no more operations, no more surgery, you know, and just really focus on, I mean, before I had the operation in August, I was on 30 tablets a day. I managed to get it down now to 15 because I was afraid to come off them. I was afraid what my life would be like, but what I was told was these tablets aren't working. I was literally taking them as like, well, I don't know. My mind thought I needed them, but the pain was no different. But yeah, I was messing my insides up. You know, I was told that, you know, that the medication can cause organ failure and all kinds of other things. And you're like, that's frightening. But I was frightened to reduce them. I was so frightened because I thought, what will the pain levels be like? And you think, well, it's been no different to what it was. So what was the point of me taking all of these tablets? But I was afraid to come off them.
Yeah. It's really, it's very powerful conversation, this, and it reinforces, you know, how it's funny for me because I always say, you know, I was very unlucky that this thing happened to me, but I was incredibly lucky that it wasn't much worse. And obviously listening to you,
that is what I say. That's exactly what I say. Obviously at the time you don't think that.
No.
When you start thinking about everything else, it's like, and I'm sure in your case, it's like it's also a double whammy, because it's like, wow, and thank God that my wife wasn't injured as well, because you know, it's so crazy when you start looking back at how different things could have been in terms of far worse, you know, because the thing is with the forklift accident, you know, you can be working in that industry and never hear of anybody having an accident. So it doesn't even cross your mind that that's happened.
Yeah.
You know, many years ago, the Forklift Truck Association, they worked out that there's five each working day forklift accidents. We went and did a speech last week, and in the car park, they've got this forklift. And although this has happened to me, where I've been involved in a forklift accident, I actually said out loud, "Oh, look at that, it's really cute." And then I said today, right, I'm going to find out how much it weighs, because literally it looked like something a child would drive. It was that small.
Right.
And when I spoke to the people, they went and checked, and it weighed 3.8 ton.
Wow.
It was so much smaller than the forklift that was involved in my accident. And then I was like looking at myself thinking, oh my God, you've been involved in a forklift accident, but you still thought, look at that diddy little thing. With that comes, probably wouldn't hurt me very much.
Yeah.
You know, you think, you know, with a forklift, you are lucky to come away with your life.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that my injuries, because he only got the one leg, I can't remember hearing the beeps from the truck, but our truck did have the sound on it when they were reversing. So I think that that's the reason why he only got one leg. Because I think, as I've heard the beats, I've turned like that.
Yeah.
And that leg was then in the way.
And I think, yeah, probably similar to me, that we were walking down the street, and as my wife I say I can't remember, she says I was sort of looking at something on my phone, but I must have seen, you know, for a split second, I must have sort of tried to get out of the way, because if I was thinking if I was just standing there like totally flat-footed, it would have just plowed through my legs, obviously. Whereas I must have managed to kind of slightly jump or something. So, but I took all the impact was on my left-hand side, so I've got a plate in my collarbone, and I broke my wrist, and I broke my ankle, and all the scarring and all that sort of stuff all down this side. But yeah, I must have been able to react in that split second to prevent it from being much worse.
So did you know, like with your accident, did you feel for a while that your personality changed?
I mean, yeah, it did, and I still feel. It's interesting what you say about your little story there about the forklift, because I was very, it took about a month to 6 weeks until I was kind of in any way, shape or form able to be up and about and doing anything. And then for several months afterwards, I was, you know, I wouldn't say scared, but very aware of like walking along pavements. And even now I'm aware of the speed of cars, probably more so than other people. But you know, like you, I've probably become a bit blasé, you know, over as the passing of time has gone on. Just because you get used to your reality, and you forget, don't you?
It's crazy, because when we first started doing our speeches, obviously the reason that we took a lot of pictures of my injuries was that I remember the health and safety induction that I had, and while I was in hospital, I thought to myself, wow, these pictures would really have an impact on people. But I can remember when we first used to deliver our speeches that I don't even think we'd give them a warning, the audience. It'd just be like, bam, look at this gross thing, you know. And literally, it's only been in the last probably 6 months where we've really reduced the amount of photos, you know, because we was having people passing out left, right and centre.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's not necessarily even because, oh, that's what's happened to her. You know, so much stuff within the story can trigger people. We had one guy who had been involved in a motorbike accident. He thought that he had come to terms with it, and then listening to my story had triggered him. You know, and so we're so much more mindful now than what we were, because in the early days, literally you would put the graphic image on and that would be on until you put a different photo on. So you've got these people having to look at this really gross injury. And it was because me and Dave were so used to, well, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, you kind of
That's how it
desensitized.
was. We were so desensitized from it, you know. But one of the things that I hadn't realised that had really impacted me was the scarring that I was left with. And it was only when I had surgery in 2020, I had it for a different reason, but I'd said to the surgeon, well, can't you just sort my stump out while you're there, because it's so gross, you know, can't you tidy it up, kind of thing. And it was really weird, because I can remember I was discharged just before lockdown. So I was at home and David would be taking photos of me in the garden, and he'd say to me, you can see the shape of your stump in the, you know, in your clothing. And I was like, I know, because that was something I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't look at it. I felt so repulsed that this thing was on my body. You know, it was so crazy. I mean, I feel so sorry now for anybody coming to the house, especially when it's summer, because I'm basically wearing hot pants. The stump's dangling out. I don't care, because to me, this is what I was meant to look like. I wasn't meant to have that thing attached. I actually went for an appointment at the amputee centre the other day, and the guy who makes my prosthetic legs, he was saying that being me putting weight through both legs, I never did that, you know, because I didn't trust it. I didn't like the stump, which was on me, and therefore I didn't trust the prosthetic legs, therefore I never put weight through it.
Yeah.
He said that it's so crazy to see me now putting equal weight through both legs, because what I've been left with, I now class, well, that is part of me. When it was all scarred, because it looked so gross, it was literally skin graft on muscle. It looked more like severe burns, but even the texture of it, I couldn't even bear to touch it. And I can remember that for a long time, when I'd have a bath, David had to be in the room with me, because when it wasn't bandaged, I was frightened.
Right.
And that really had an impact on my rehabilitation, because I saw this as this foreign object that was now part of my body that I didn't want part of my body. We would go on holiday to Spain for a month in August. And when we was out in public, I'd put 2 thick black tights on it, because I was so repulsed by it. How could I force that onto strangers, that they would have to look at it? You know, it's so crazy. I hadn't realized how much that psychologically damaged me. You know, and it's so weird to have that thought process that this is what I was meant to look like, and that's how I see it. This is what I was always meant to look like. You know, it's before and after. Neither is a worse life than the other. It's just different now. You know, and I think that when you're at peace like that, that your family can then be at peace, and they can start to realize that, you know, this is her life now, so there's no point, you know, thinking about the what ifs, because it's not going to change.
Yeah, like you mentioned about your uncle, you know, it wasn't so much, he was obviously very upset, and it wasn't that he was upset for himself, he was upset for you. And then I guess seeing you with the strength and the resilience to kind of get through it and now be in a better place. It takes time. He's probably in a better, you know.
He was literally the worst person in terms of, I had friends find out because he was on the bus telling everybody. He was in the doctors telling everybody that this had happened. I mean, I can remember going to a pub, and my uncle took me over to this big table of people he's like, oh, this is my niece I was telling you about. And I'm obviously stood there a bit embarrassed because it's like, really don't know these people. And then when we went back to our table, I said, who are they? And he went, I don't know. I was like, he was so proud of me that I was now walking and stuff. But it's like, oh my God, not everyone cares as much as you do.
Yeah.
I don't know these people. So it was so bizarre, but he was so devastated when it happened, but it's just one of them things. It's a process, and if you're okay and you can come to terms with it, the people around you can start relaxing and realizing that, well, yeah, she has still got a good life. I'm incredibly lucky, that Dave stood by me, because for a while, that I wasn't a very nice person. I'd become easily angry and frustrated and that kind of thing, and obviously there's a lot of guilt there, especially when you realise that actually he went through things and had nobody to talk to about it, because how can you say to anybody out loud, my life changed, I had to get rid of my car, I lost my job, I'm having to look after Lisa and all this other stuff, actually share that, because you're just supposed to do that and be happy about it. And so it is. I always think now it's far worse for the people around the injured party, because they're having to, in my mind, I walk the same as I used to. In my mind, I dance the same as I used to. I don't observe the fact that I've got this massive limp. It's only when my granddaughter started mimicking me when she was like 2 that I'm like, wow, is that how I really walk? I'm going to wipe that from my memory. Obviously it's the other people around you that see the struggles, whereas I don't see it as struggle. I see it as getting from A to B.
Interesting. Well, let's turn to kind of some of the positive aspects of this from the perspective of what you're now doing, and talk a bit about what you've done, or what you're doing now to kind of raise awareness and help people, and talk a bit about the stuff you do now in your talks.
So both of us now go into companies, we deliver our speeches, explaining the impact it has on those other people. Because I'll be honest, if it was just me, right, they were probably thinking, what a sad story, let's go back to work, it won't happen to me. That's what I genuinely believe, if it was just me doing it. I think that when they listen to Dave, the impact on him, the impact on Kieran, that's when people then start thinking, right, well, Dave's story would be my wife's story, or my husband's story, my boyfriend's story. That's when they start thinking, especially if you've got people in the audience who've got children. And so for us, we enjoy doing it. It's very therapeutic.
I class, when we go out and do the speeches, I class that as my CBT. I've managed to catch up with Lisa on so many levels. I know it sounds really weird, but when we used to talk about the accident and things like that, because I was focused on the driver, because I was focused on the company, Lisa was over that. I wasn't. I still wanted her to get that apology. I still wanted her to, do whatever to the driver. It was when we started speaking, and you do say it, because of the repetition of saying the speech, it comes, you do start to think, what is the point? Why am I holding Lisa back? Why am I doing this? Why am I dragging her back into the dark part of it? Whereas she's already through that, if you get what I mean. Like she says, with a mum, because a mum does look at the fact that, look how she's walking, you know, look how she's dancing. You know, it's not that. It's, you should, you know, embrace life as such, if you get what I mean. Because obviously now Lisa's living her life and she's enjoying it. You know, I don't think that me and Lisa have ever been as happy as we are now, because of the fact that we are doing the speeches.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. One thing somebody said to me once, what positive has come out of you delivering the speeches? And I can remember, because of the way things go when you're involved in an accident, that I became mistrustful. Is that the word? Well, I didn't trust anybody.
Yeah.
And I can remember, because I'm a very open book, that if ever it came into conversation about trust, I would say, I'd feel awkward, but I'd say the same line, that I don't trust anybody, not even my own mum and dad. And the only person that I can trust is myself. And I was like a robot. That's what I'd say every time. And I'd think to myself, how must that make Dave feel? That's how I truly believe that this person who was stood by me, who took all the abuse and all of that stuff that came with it when I felt frustrated, and then the icing on the cake would be that I would be saying that I don't trust anybody. You know, when we started doing the speeches, I always said I'd never forget those people that were there for me, but I did. And you do, because life moves on. When we started doing the speeches again, you know, it was a massive reminder of how incredibly lucky I am and how much support I have been given and still are given by those around me. So that was such a positive for me, that, you know, how can you be in a successful marriage when you don't trust anybody? You know, and that must have been so hurtful to hear that. But that's how I truly felt. I felt as though I couldn't trust anybody anymore. You know, the investigation, all the parts of it had such a detrimental effect to me that's how I genuinely believe. Because I can remember my friend saying something and I'd say that line and she'd go, what? You don't even trust me? And I'd just repeat the line. I don't even trust my mum and dad. You know, and it's just absolutely crazy. But like Dave says, you know, I said to him the other day that I feel so happy and content. Yes, I'm in pain. And yes, I wish it hadn't have happened.
Yeah.
I can't change that. It's happened. There's nothing I can do about that, you know, and I'm incredibly lucky because, and you are actually, you know, in terms of your accident, you know, for you and your wife to have been able to get over that is incredible. And we don't often think about things like that, that, you know, we rely on our partners to take flack when we're feeling a certain kind of way, you know. And I know doing this kind of job that not a lot of relationships can overcome something like this, because for a while you do change, you know. But luckily for me, 3 years worth of counselling, you know, I was very lucky in that respect, because most people wouldn't get that long, you know. And obviously I was able to overcome it, because it is as though I'm telling somebody else's story. That's how it feels to me. You know, someone bumps into me in the street, they're like, oh, what happened to you? You know, some random stranger, like they do. And you're like, oh, I was run over by a forklift. They're always so shocked and then regret asking, because I'm so blasé about it, because, well, that's what happened. You know, they think I was born this way most of the time. So they're like, oh, what's happened to you then? It's like, well, I was run over by a forklift. So, you know.
Yeah. It's an interesting world we live in, isn't it? That's for sure.
Oh yeah, people aren't afraid. People aren't afraid to just come and ask you questions. You know what I had once, right, which I thought this was so funny. We was at Butlins and I was in the swimming pool and these two kids, they'd got the swimming goggles on and the snorkel, and they swam underwater all the way up to me. Then I'll come out the water and I says to her, do you want to ask me any questions? And they just swam off really quickly. I thought, did they really think that I couldn't see them looking at my stump in the water? Did they think that? You know, but to be honest, kids, they are the best.
There's no filter.
They will ask you. It's the adults that become frightened the minute they clock you and think, oh God, is my child going to ask any questions? Well, that's the whole point of it. They've probably never seen somebody with that kind of disability or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And you got to talk about these things, right? That's the I mean, that's the whole point. Yeah, that's the insight.
The Paralympics is a huge positive in certain respects and a huge negative, because then the public think, and I've asked me quite a lot of times, have you ever thought about doing the Paralympics? And you're like, I'm a couch potato, I'm overweight. Do you think I'd be on the top of the list for any exercise? No, I wouldn't. I mean, come on, I'm nearly 50 as well. I'm hardly like the most, you know, the best person that you'd pick to be in a race or anything like that. So the Paralympics are a massive positive, because people get to see these different abled people, you know, doing different things. But on the other side, then I think that I can run a marathon or something. Yeah. You think, well, no, I wasn't very energetic before I had my accident. I'm certainly not energetic now.
Yeah, positives and negatives to everything. Yeah. So for people that have joined us on this journey, and I'm sure they'll be moved by it, what's the best way, you know, if they want to get in touch with you to get you guys in to do your talk? Because I mean, I would certainly encourage everybody to do that, because I think the power of it's great to share the story here on this medium, but actually the power of doing it face to face in a room and being able to ask questions, and you know, I think that's where it's really at. So what's the best way of people to get in touch?
To add us on LinkedIn, I'm Lisa Ramos.
I'm Dave Garton.
So although we are married, I'm an independent woman. So I did keep my surname. But to add us on LinkedIn, there's also, I can direct anybody who's watching to some free resources. There's actually been a short film that was made that's about 25 minutes long. It's based on the first 12 months after the accident. It's not factual, but it's based on, and it's got the flavour of what happened. And for me, it's absolutely a fantastic health and safety resources. We have a lot of companies who are now using it as an induction, because it's more like a drama, you know. But we even had family and friends who were quite shocked after they'd watched it, because they didn't realise how bad things got at times. And again, it wasn't that we were hiding it from people. It was just that when you're seeing these people, you're happy to see them. Yeah. You know, you don't want to be that Debbie Downer at a party, you know, crying and whatnot. You are genuinely, you know, happy to see these people. So there's quite a lot of free resources that are out there that I can put people, either send them the files or send them the links, and we're more than happy to do that, because that's what it's about for us. You know, we go into businesses, yes, we do that, but also there are free resources that we're happy for people to use within their company.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much. It was I don't know if I want to say I enjoyed it, because obviously it's not the but it was kind of therapeutic for me to have this conversation.
It was actually really good, because it's so weird when you can speak to somebody and have that shared experience. Yeah. And as well, because obviously you're still with your wife. So it's the same, if you get what I mean. It's kind of the same. So it is very therapeutic when you hear somebody else with the same story, but also the fact that you moved on, this is your life, and it's kind of a mirror of mine, because if you're still in that place, you probably won't be married. I definitely won't be married, and it's good to see that you can overcome these things when you go through something that's quite traumatic at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's no better way of finishing than that. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and look forward to keeping in touch with you. And thanks for joining Lisa, Dave and I on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.